My name is Diane Lenamon, and I live here in Houston, Texas. And I'm a publisher. I am a publisher, and I'm also an artist, and I do watercolor art. And I used to live in Fort Worth, Texas, but I moved here after my husband passed away. So we no longer travel in an RV.
I'm sorry to hear about your husband, Diane, but thank you for sharing your story. And I'm going to ask you a few questions about your book. So, Diane, how many books have you written, and which one is your favorite?
I've read about 7 books. My favorite really are my children's books because they're all from life when my children were growing up, and they're pretty funny.
Well, I'm looking forward to reading some of the children books that you created. But right now, I know that you published a book and it's called Our Condo on Wheels. Can you share with us what is the significance of the title?
Well, in 2002, on my birthday, my husband presented us with a 40-foot motorhome, and as we traveled in it, it seemed to be small. So he said, I'm going to get a bigger one. And I said, oh my goodness. So anyway, we went and got a 45-foot, and it had 4 slides on it. And I said, oh, this is like having a condo on wheels. And he said, oh, that's a nice thing. So as we traveled, I always picked up brochures and always put it in my journal, different nice places that we go to, and put them in a drawer under our table in the motor coach. So when I started writing a book, my husband said, where did you get all that from? And I said, I've been putting it in that drawer there. Well, I didn't know it. And I said, well, you were too busy buying stocks. He said, oh, okay.
Well, that's a good way to get an RV by investing in stocks, right? But that's a lovely story of why you wrote the title. Now, I know you put in a lot of pictures in the book, and there's a lot of story to those pictures. Do you think it's good enough for a movie, and why?
I definitely think it's good enough for a movie because it shows people the experience of traveling, especially in a motor coach. A lot of people nowadays have sold their homes and gone into a motor coach to take their children and experience the history here in the US. And I just feel like that making a movie would be more better for children to see and also adults. But it's a wonderful life. It really is. And I wouldn't have given it up for anything except my husband passing away.
That part made me sad, but I was excited, seeing it in a movie and seeing all the places that you've been to, different people that you've met, and getting into the people that you've met. I know along your travels, you've gone to different places and met different people. Do you have a favorite character that you have written? And if so, what makes them so special?
The special character, I think, was really my husband. He was quite funny. But anyway, he told me when we were going into Quebec, he says, don't be surprised if they don't talk to you. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, they just don't talk. I said, okay. So we decided to park the coach in the space, and we took off to go doing some shopping. And I walked into a dress shop, and he was following me. And when we got ready to leave, I wanted a certain place to go to. And I asked the lady, and she said, oh, yes, come here. We'll go. I'll go with you and show you where it is. And I turned around, looked at my husband, and just cracked up because she was following us down the street and she was talking to us. But I found that in Quebec that people were very friendly, and they did not mind giving you any instructions or directions. And it's a lovely city. It's just full of history.
Well, based on that story alone, you make me want to go to Quebec right now. You know, even now, after you've written the book, you know, I can tell from your expressions and the way you talk about it, how wonderful the experience was going into that country. So thank you for sharing that piece with me. Um, and now that you've been sharing, you know, the characters and the significance of the book, what was the inspiration of the story?
I've always wanted to write. Um, Growing up, I just used to just doodle, in art, but nothing really, good. But always, when I would go on a trip or anything, I would always be jotting things down about what I did and where I went and everything. So I think it was really in the books for me to be a writer. And I've thoroughly enjoyed it. The only thing I hated is when I have to do the editing. But I think any person who writes needs to do their own editing before they put it out to another person to check it.
That's really good advice. Now, during, you know, writing the book, what was the highlight of writing it?
The excitement that came out of yourself, uh, I could express myself, and then when I go back and read it, it was what I wanted. So it pulls things out of you. Another book I have been working on, um, it is very sad, but it ends up being very happy.
And that's the kind of book I like. It's sad and then, you know, a happy ever after book, right? Like
Yes.
happy ending. Everyone wants to be happy when they're reading something. And you know, since you've gone through a lot and you have a lot of experience, can you tell us about your first published book and what the journey was like?
The first published, of course, is Condo on Wheels. And when I was writing it, I was so afraid that I was going to leave something out of it. And I kept a journal. Uh, but even when you keep a journal, you don't always get everything in there. So I would go over it and go over it and over it. But I felt very proud of myself when I did get it finished. And I did have people contact me wanting to make a movie, and they said it may take a few years. They would come back and do it. Also have been interviewed by a producer for a movie. Um, we just have to wait and see.
What inspired you to become an author?
Well, with the children's books, I would write down things that they would do, my children. I had 5 children, and there were funny things. And one that was very funny was um, my husband was a pilot, and he had gone, my first husband was a pilot, and he had gone out to fly one night, and he was locking up the hangar, and there was a cat in there, and she had had a litter of kittens. And so, anyway, it was summertime, it was hot, and he got in the car and started down the freeway, and all of a sudden he heard meow, and all of a sudden that cat jumped on his shoulder, and he like wrecked. But anyway, he came home and he couldn't leave it in the car, so he brought it in the house. Well, during the night, I got up because I have restless legs, and I was walking around the living room, and I shut all the other doors. All of a sudden, these big old yellow eyes were staring at me, and I let out a yell. He come running in there, and I said, "What in the world?" And it was a cat. So I started jotting things down and writing about that. And it looked like a Halloween cat. It had so many colors in it.
Oh boy, that seems scary to me. It reminds me of those black cats. How long have you been writing?
About 20 years. But I just never got anything out there because it's just so expensive and, getting it published. But I just feel like maybe I'm going to be like Grandma Moses with my books instead of the artwork.
Have you always wanted to be a writer?
No, not really. I started off wanting to be a missionary. Um, and I was going to school to become a missionary. And when I met my first husband, it kind of changed. I went and talked to my pastor about it because I was already enrolled in the school to go, and my husband had already asked me to marry him, and I was very confused. And so I went to my pastor and we sat down and talked about it. And he said, "You know what, Diane? You can be a missionary, but you can also be a missionary in your own home. If you have children, you minister to them and you minister to people around you." And I never thought of it that way.
Wow, that was a good way of thinking about that. So
Yeah.
I've never
So
thought.
I accepted his proposal.
There you go. Um, how do you see your books 5 years from now?
Hopefully there'll be a movie and in all the bookstores and displayed, because I feel like with all the work I put into them that they need to be out there.
And I agree, people love a good adventure, right?
Yes, and it has everything in it.
There you go. Now, what advice would you give a new writer, someone just starting out?
Keep a journal and write in it every day and go back and forth to be sure that's what you want in there. And when you go to put it in a computer, stop and save it after each page because you can lose them very easily. And I know Jay asked me to send him some papers on my book, and I had used one. I don't know. I used one on my computer, but then I lost it. So anyway, I don't even have a hard copy. My hard copy is my papers and my files, but I don't have one on the computer because I did something and lost it. Or either when I was something happened not too long ago to me, and I took it into Geek, and they said that some of the things not be on there. So that's probably one of them. So, but always save your whatever you're working on each day and print it out and put it into a folder. And that way you've got your backup.
I think that's great advice. I've interviewed a lot of people, and that's the first time I've heard anyone say save it, because
Oh, you do. Because if you are going to be a publisher, you need to save everything you do, everything.
so where can readers purchase your books?
They can get them on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and Mad Mac. And I made publisher of author, I'm sorry, author of the month in August with Amazon.
That's really good to hear. Where can readers find out more about you and your books?
I have a website. It's called DianeLenamonOfficial.com. And also have some artwork on there also.
Well, thank you, Diane. Now, lastly, how's your experience working with Bookmark Alliance?
Oh, it's been very good. Sophie's been very good and knowledgeable. And Jay, he's always calling me, wanting to get it all updated. And they're very on top of it, I would